Well, meanwhile, on the ground, the theatre of war appears to be widening still. Tehran said it had hit Kurdish groups in Iraq that are opposed to the regime and warned what it called separatist groups against action in the widening war. This amid reports that the United States is looking to arm Kurdish guerrillas to infiltrate Iran. Well, I'm joined to talk about that on set by our international affairs editor, Philip Turl. Hi, Philip. So, we're hearing that Trump is talking to Kurdish leaders. What is all that about? Can you give us the
Not only
background?
Trump, the CIA has also been supporting Kurdish groups over the past few months, I think with a view to the fact that they're very angry with the regime in Iran. They say they've been discriminated against for decades and they want their revenge. And now that they have launched these attacks, the Americans and the Israelis against Iran, these Kurdish groups see a window of opportunity where they may be able to go in and to start fighting against the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. So I think that is where this is coming from. And the second point is that the Americans don't really want to send boots in the ground into Iran. That is something that Donald Trump has hinted that he might do, but there's no firm confirmation of that so far from the American president. But this may offer an alternative because these Kurdish groups, many of them on the border between Iraq and Iran, are willing to send in their forces to try to fight against the Iranian regime. Now, I think what the Americans are seeing here is three possibilities. The first one is that if they do go into Iran, these Iranian groups, these Kurdish groups, Iraqi Kurds, Iranian Kurds, if they go into Iran, they might be able to take on the Iranian armed forces and to pin them down. And when that happens, that will offer a leeway to many of the people in Iran who may be scared about protesting, looking back about what happened in January where up to 30,000 people were killed, in the knowledge that the security forces in Iran are no longer capable of opening fire on them like they did back then, and this may open a window of opportunity for them to take power. That's the first option. The second option is that the Kurds could show or sow chaos in the region and stretch the Iranian regime's military capacity to the limit, and its resources could then become much thinner. That would also open the door to more retaliatory attacks from the United States, from Israel, and maybe other countries too, to put paid to the Iranian regime once and for all. And the third point is that the Kurds could take and hold territory in the northern part of Iran, and that would act as a buffer zone for Israel to be able to launch more attacks against Iran in a much easier fashion than they are being launched at the moment from Israel. So there are these three aspects that I think are being looked upon by the Israelis and by the Americans, and that's why they are talking to these Iranian groups, these Kurdish groups in Iran and also in Iraq, which is something that has worried people in the region. There is one aspect which may backfire on the Americans, and that is there is a feeling amongst some Kurds that they were let down by the Americans in the old days, and they'd helped, for example, fight against the Islamic State. They'd also looked after IS prisoners in Syria, but they feel that the United States should just basically turn their back on them and let them down. So will they be that keen to support the United States one more time around? We'll have to wait and see.
Stay with us, Philip. We are also joined on the line now from Dublin by Scott Lucas, who is Professor of US and International Politics at the Clinton Institute at University College Dublin. Scott Lucas, also formerly an adjunct professor at Tehran University. Thanks for your time, Mr. Lucas. Welcome to the programme. You perhaps heard Philip there laying out some of the options that appear to be out there regarding the Kurds. What do you think is likely to happen? And of course, bearing in mind, as Philip said, so often the Kurds feel they've been used, if you like, and then let down. What do you think might be their involvement?
Where we are right now, from what we know, primarily from leaks from officials, is that there have been discussions between the Trump camp and leaders in Iraqi Kurdistan. That includes conversations between Donald Trump and those leaders. And we're being told that, yes, as Philip has talked about, these Iranian Kurdish Peshmerga fighters have been trained by U.S. forces, likely to be CIA, for a possible incursion into Western Iran. There is no final date that has been agreed on an incursion yet. So I think The timing of this is going to depend on how developments go. But I think the wider framework here is that the Trump administration is suffering because it does not have a plan B. Plan A, alongside the Israelis, was to go in and to force the regime to surrender, to capitulate, to give up its nuclear programs, to give up its ballistic missile programs. As you have been discussing, the regime has not capitulated despite the killing of the supreme leader, and indeed has been carrying out this retaliation across the region and beyond. So what is your plan B? Well, more bombing. That doesn't seem to be having an effect. Putting American boots on the ground inside Iran, very tricky for the Trump folks, given the experience of Iraq 2003 and Trump's own promise not to carry out foreign interventions. So you try to use someone else. You try to use the Kurdish fighters. The problem with this is that even if you think that the Kurds could maintain a foothold in their part of Iran, and the regime will unleash their military, they will unleash all of them to try to prevent that happening. Even if the Kurds succeeded there, the regime is still in place in Tehran. And as we saw in Iraq in 1991, the US encouraged the Kurds to rise up there. Saddam Hussein's forces cut them down. In 2003, yes, you did get an Iraqi Kurdistan, but that was in the wider context of insurgency and deadly civil war in Iraq. So it is a risky option for the Americans, and I think it smacks more of a little bit of desperation rather than of considered planning.
So do you think the Kurds will not cooperate?
Well, I think, look, it depends. If the Iranian Kurdish Peshmerga think, look, we've been wanting to fight Iran for years, we've been wanting to liberate our territory, they'll probably take support to go across the border. But where are you with political leaders? Do Iranian Kurdish political leaders think this is the way to go forward because it's extremely risky? What about the Iraqi Kurdish leaders? And as I speak to you, the Iraqi Kurdish leaders are saying we do not want our region to be used as a launching pad for these operations. Though I think it's far more complex than simply some fighters who want to have a go at Tehran and saying, well, that's it, the operation can proceed. I think there's a lot of politics that would have to be navigated.
While we still have Philip here, I just wanted to look at another area where this, if you like, theatre of war has expanded again. Azerbaijan now being hit by a missile fired by Iran. Why would Azerbaijan be considered a target by Iran?
Okay, well, the first point here is that Azerbaijan is situated north of Iran and they have a long common border. And this is an easy exit point for people who want to quit Iran in a hurry. And they have set up what they're calling a special regime in Azerbaijan to allow people to get out of Iran quickly. It means diplomats, Russians, Italians, people who want to get out and not be caught up in the crossfire. And so there is this border which is situated almost on the sea on the northern border between Iran and Afghanistan, Iran and Azerbaijan. Now there are a couple of other reasons that the Iranians may have decided to fire a missile into Azerbaijan. The first one is that Azerbaijan has been known for quite a while now as being a country that transmits information to Israel concerning extremist groups that want to destroy Israel, and they have had a very close cooperative agreement between the two countries to transmit that information, which is something, of course, that does coincide with Iran's objective, which is also to destroy Israel. Several arrests have been made over this within Azerbaijan itself in connection with the passing on of these secrets. And the other area which is also quite important to underline is the relationship between Azerbaijan and the United States. Just recently, J.D. Vance, the US Vice President, went to Azerbaijan. There were a series of contracts that were signed between the two countries, notably on energy and regional connectivity, including artificial intelligence, the economic aspect, there was investment, and also security and cooperation, including defense and counterterrorism. So all of these contracts have linked the United States also to Azerbaijan. And as we've been discussing, one of the objectives of the Iranian regime is to make this a regional war, a regional conflict, by dragging in more countries and making this much more difficult for the United States and Israel to find an easy way out of the conflict. And that is why I don't think we have to look very far to find the reasons for this missile being fired into Azerbaijan as a result of its connections to, first of all, Israel and also to the US.
And, as this war has been expanded and expanded, Tehran's decision apparently to try to involve as many countries as possible. I mean, is this a strategic blunder? There are lots of reports that the Gulf states, who, initially really didn't want this war, tried to dissuade Donald Trump. There are reports now that they are saying to the Israelis and the Americans, get it done decisively and swiftly. Do you think that Iran has made a mistake expanding the war, making so many countries targets? Scott Lucas?
Oh, I think that depends on how this turns out. Look, although the Gulf states are reportedly saying to the Trump folks, look, get it done quickly, there's also a concern that the Trump folks won't get it done quickly. Therefore, you have instability and uncertainty for some time to come. So Qatar in particular this week launched an initiative, a quiet initiative, to go to the Trump folks and say, look, can you possibly de-escalate this? Can you open up the space to talk to the Iranians? Donald Trump, I think, implicitly rejected that on Tuesday when in a White House press conference, he said, no talks with Tehran. But I do think you're going to see the Gulf states are not going to publicly challenge the U.S. war in Iran, but I think quietly they're going to be trying to look for off-ramps here, because the big fear here is, look, if you change the regime or if the regime suddenly collapses, you do not get a transition to power which provides stability. The organized opposition has been imprisoned, it's been forced to flee, it is not in a position to step in. And in that case, the fear is it goes back to Iraq in 2003. Can I also add to what you've been talking to Philip about with Azerbaijan, which links to this? I think Philip is absolutely on the mark that Iran is looking to pull more states into this conflict as a gamble, which is, if we just sit on our hands and don't do anything, the U.S. and Israel will pick us off. But if we pull Azerbaijan in the Gulf states in as well, then there are others that express concern. And the one thing I would add to Philip's excellent explanation is the oil pipelines. Azerbaijan is a key point for the oil pipelines that run all the way to Turkey. And where else did Iran attack this week? By scrambling a fighter that was intercepted by NATO defenses? Turkey.
It's very difficult to say. Obviously, this thing could go any way. And it's not clear that even Donald Trump and Benjamin Netanyahu had the same aims when they embarked upon this thing. What do you think Trump wants from it? Well, it's obvious what Netanyahu wants from it, but what do you think Trump wants from it? And in spite of the enormous possibility for disaster, do you think it's likely that whatever happens, it could end up being better than what is there now, which is a brutal regime which terrorizes the neighborhood? It's not very hard to improve upon that, some people might say. The Americans would say.
Yeah, there's some great questions there. First of all, the Israeli objectives are different from the Trump camp. The Israelis want regime change. They want every political, religious, military official connected with the Islamic Republic gone. They aren't really sure who would replace them, but they just want them gone. The U.S. or the Trump camp wants a regime capitulation. They've made clear in recent days that they want the end to the nuclear and the ballistic missile programs. And there's been indications, which is, look, if the regime agrees to that, it can stay in place, even though, as you mentioned, it has been repressive and that it killed thousands, perhaps tens of thousands of Iranians, including some of my friends, in January's protest. The issue I've got here is yes, we would like to see a better way forward in Iran, first and foremost for Iranians. But that question of how you get there, I don't think has been thought through. The fact of the matter here is that it is not likely that you can change a regime or force its surrender through air power alone. That it is not necessarily going to be easy to try to replace that regime by bringing in other groups and other factions. And if you have not thought this through carefully, what happens here is that you get rid of a bloody regime, a repressive regime, but then you wind up with a country that falls apart in insurgency and sectarian conflict. We are not that far away from that happening in Iraq. We're not that way far from happening in Afghanistan. And I just have to be honest with you. While the Trump camp may have these general objectives about regime surrender, Donald Trump just wants to kill people and blow stuff up. And when you break international law to do that, as Colin Powell said a generation ago, in a different United States, you break it, you buy it.
Okay, really interesting to get your perspective on that. Scott Lucas, thank you so much. We could talk for much longer, but we are, I'm afraid, out of time. Scott Lucas there at the Clinton Institute at University College Dublin, and our own Philip Tell here with us on set. Thanks very much.